Imagine me and you, I do. Back in the 1980 nights, comedy heights, and now in 2025, we do not reach the happiness together. If I see you, please tell me why they thought this remake was a good idea with Benedict Cumberbatch, Olivia Colman, and nothing to hold it together. From the director of the Austin Powers movies, yo, and Bombshell, and two of the Meet the Parents, and Fucker Rose. Imagine me and you watching The Roses, which is a remake of The War of the Roses, which is based on the novel by Warren Adler. And The War of the Roses is a retro review that I did recently. It was directed by Danny DeVito, stars Danny DeVito. Him and Sean Astin were the same height at that time. Sean Astin actually mostly grew out rather than up. That being said, Sean Astin is nowhere near this. Nobody that was in the original, at least as far as any mainstream stars, were in this. This is a remake of the 1989 dark comedy movie. This was directed by Jay Roach. His wife actually sung a version of So Happy Together for the opening and closing of this movie. Boy, you want to talk about fucking nepotism, because I don't know how much thought she put into that song, but more would have helped. There was another guy that sung that, but that was a lazy rendition of So Happy Together. Speaking of which, here's a lazy rendition of The Roses. I'm tipping my hand as to how I felt about The Roses. I was looking forward to this. By the way, if you remember Bombshell, Jay Roach also did that. So this was written by Tony McNamara, who's done television. He did Ashby. I don't actually know what that is. He did The Favorite, and he did Cruella, and he did Poor Things. So he's done good stuff, none of which was applied here. Benedict Cumberbatch is phenomenal. He's hilarious. He's a great dramatic actor. He understands the assignment, and Cumberbatch is not a funny name. Stop laughing. This is a serious review. He plays Theo Rose, who's an architect who has dreams of having his designs being seen all over America, investing a lot of money to make sure that lavish productions are done so he can get more funding and create his visions, as every architect wants to do. And his wife, Ivy, played by Olivia Colman, who was really good in Wicked Little Letters and has been good in other stuff. Olivia Colman's phenomenal. She is a cook. They meet and they end up actually having a family together, and she opens a bunch of restaurants at the behest of her husband, also encouragement from her friends. And Theo, meanwhile, is taking care of the kids after a certain thing takes him out of doing architecture for the time being. The kids are fine, I will say that. The little versions, the teenage versions of them. Actually, the daughter was in Hypnotic, so I hope she gets to be in better projects than that, because Hypnotic was terrible. And you also have Kate McKinnon. I wish Kate McKinnon would hug me like she hugged Benedict Cumberbatch in one scene in this. I don't have issues. Shut up. Her husband is Andy Samberg, who's... man, some good stuff. You also have Nukti Gatwu. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. He plays a very, very gay waiter. That's what I was trying to say. And actually, I think I would have rather followed what his character was doing, because he at least had some fun in some scenes. Allison Janney has one scene as a divorce attorney, and it's pretty much the highlight of the goddamn movie. You also have Sunita Mani, who was in Death of a Unicorn, and is very funny, and is also very gorgeous, so that didn't hurt. All the necessary components were there to at least do an updated version of it, because I didn't expect it to be as dark or horrific as some parts of The War of the Roses were. The tone wasn't going to be able to be carried over to 2025. I understood that. Modernizing it, and while having two talented, very snarky, very gifted British actors sniping at each other, sign me the fuck up. Sadly, they did not let Benedict and Olivia snipe at each other nearly as much. When they did, there was actually some life to it. But it felt like, oh, we're going to, go for a little bit of bite, and then it pulls back. And then we're going to go for a little more, and then we pull back. And that's pretty much The Roses right there. They change a few things around. Instead of, Michael Douglas's character being a lawyer and doing what he's doing, they do keep the food aspect of this whole thing going with, you had Kathleen Turner gaining encouragement to start her own, cooking business. This is just more updated, where I did like how the restaurant was titled We've Got Crabs. That actually made me laugh quite a bit, made me funny. That wouldn't have made any sense. Reminds me of when I went to Joe's Crab Shack, which, yes, is an actual place that we have in the Pacific Northwest, specifically about 8 hours from me in Boise, when I was visiting with my at-the-time girlfriend and her dad to visit a bunch of Italian relatives, most of which came in from Chicago. They were not related to the mob that I know about. That being said, Joe's Crab Shack, the staff had shirts that said, "Crabs are for eating, not itching." And that was hilarious. I wish I would have bought a shirt. So, the funniest thing about this movie is when they allowed Benedict and Olivia to just have fun, being a snarky British couple, the repression, that kind of stuff. And just being allowed to be themselves, just being allowed to let their talent show. Kate McKinnon's character feels divorced from this whole goddamn thing. Ironic, since divorce is a thing that is talked about. But just not enough of this movie feels like, we get the colleagues, and I hate to compare this to the original, because I know that there are going to be updates, but we see Michael Douglas's, fellow, lawyers and stuff like that. And we see them, but we see more of the family, and we have we have the kids being introduced, and then going off to college and then coming back for Christmas and stuff like that. This, we get a little bit more of an update with the kids being taken care of by Theo after he has his issue with his job, while Ivy's work is expanding and she's having to work a whole lot more. So it's the inverse of, Kathleen Turner wanting to grow her business and not take care of the kids, while Michael Douglas wants her to kind of, do stuff, even though they have some hired help. There's the building of the house, big old fancy house, which is a nice house, admittedly. But it takes so long to get to any of the stuff that made the first one work, about them, playing little games on each other and sniping at each other and stuff like that. And there's no wraparound thing like there was with Danny DeVito's Gavin, where he was telling the story and stuff like that. And the way he was telling it, you knew that there probably wasn't going to be the happiest ending. And sorry, spoiler for the War of the Roses, there wasn't necessarily a happy ending, but it was kind of their own doing. This one tips its hand so fucking early that, unfortunately, you know that nothing major is going to happen. And even when it seems like something's going to, the movie just ends. It is like, okay, did we know what we were fucking doing? Did we just, read, the first page of the War of the Roses and just say, yeah, that's great? Anyway, it's going to be in theaters if you want to check it out. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So I don't have a ton to say as far as, minutia and stuff like that. I did like how we, had the opening, we had the meeting. She was just cooking at a restaurant, Ivy was, and we had Bandit Cumberbatch trying to get out of a meeting. He ends up in the kitchen. They end up kind of having a bit of a little, rapport and everything. And they end up fucking in the the food cooler. And then we get the So Happy Together rendition. It was terrible. I'm sorry. I'm not saying the woman can't sing, but goddamn, try to find something else to do. That is an example of nepotism right there. So anyway, we then see that they're living at a nice beachfront thing in Mendocino, California. They're having some fun. He decides to buy her a restaurant because she's really good at cooking. And even though they do have the usual British banter, obviously as they have had kids, things have kind of grown a little bit apart. Not that they don't love each other, but their priorities have gone in different directions. He has this idea to build this great, part of this, maritime museum with a big old sailboat on top and everything, right on the coast. So you know something's going to get fucked up with that. And it is also revealed that she has a food allergy. She has a food allergy to a particular type of berry. And he's always got the EpiPen ready, so you know that's going to factor into the finish of this movie. And the only pseudo kind of wraparound thing that we saw from the trailer was the therapy thing. And we only get 2 therapy sessions, and it tips its hand so early that we see with the therapy sessions that everything's fine. Like, they're going to work their stuff out, even though they're still sniping at each other. They're going to work their shit out. And that was at the behest after, sometime later, they show the Alice and Janie divorce lawyer scene with Andy Samberg acting as Theo's, deal, and then acting about the house and stuff like that, and they want the house and all that. And I don't know what the point of this was, because I don't think the people involved, as far as putting it together, I'm not talking about the cast, understood what made The War of the Roses work, which was by no means a perfect movie. I mean, I did give it 4 stars on Letterboxd, and we'll waffle between a B+ and A-, if we're being honest. Probably more of an A-, because I ended up enjoying it quite a bit, but it's still not a perfect movie. Warts and all, though, it mostly works. This just feels sanitized, pasteurized, and doesn't feel like it really bites down when it should. Kate McCann is hating on Benedict Cumberbatch. I wish a woman would look at me like that, but I also don't, because I'm tired of relationships. And there is a line in this that, so someone needs to sacrifice themselves for on the altar of marriage, but who is it going to be? And there's also like the type where after Theo, basically what ends up happening, what happens to Theo's work is after this restaurant opens, they're not having the most customers and stuff like that. His grand opening of this new building with the big old sailboat and everything, there's a big freak storm, northeastern, not the northeastern, but this is more like a Pacific Ocean thing, because this is on the completely opposite side of the coast. Wrecks thing, it collapses, burned, that kind of stuff, and his boss ends up basically making him a scapegoat. And he is going to take care of the kids, and he decides to dedicate his children to getting physically fit. And they do get physically fit, and actually, I do have to say that the younger kids, the teenage kids as well, they do fine. They do fine in this. I don't think the kids are necessarily the issue. And I did like that they expanded more on the relationship with the kids. So I didn't mind some of the tweaks. I just didn't think that enough of it was spent, with these two sniping at each other, to where by the time we get to the eventual, they're playing cruel pranks on each other over the house. Crabs being dumped in the goddamn, bathtub, like just crazy stuff going, a scraping of a wart onto this goddamn food. And, these hallucinogenic mushrooms being sent to the restaurant and stuff where they're joking around with each other. Well, I mean, it's jokes for us, but it's supposed to be them sniping at each other and playing cruel pranks on each other. None of it feels earned. It all feels like very stagnant and very static. And you do get a nice bit of building between Benedict Cumberbatch and the two that play the kids and everything. And there's even a moment where, Ivy realizes she's a little too invested in her own businesses, going to New York to make deals, going to other stuff, restaurants all around the goddamn country. Even though we only ever see this one, we see her, cooking food at a New York restaurant when they go off while the kids, I assume, are being taken care of by somebody. Because before the kids go off on some kind of whatever the fuck it is, and even when they eventually reveal they're going to get divorced, the kids say over the phone, over a video call, oh, thank God, because you guys have basically been fracturing for the last decade plus. So when Olivia and Benedict are allowed to just go for it, there are a few moments where they're allowed to, and it works, but none of it is cohesive enough. None of it justifies this remake beyond the star power. Also, there is entirely too little drinking in this. If I'm not being a sarcasm drum hard enough, I don't know what to tell you. There's a dinner scene where, there's like they do the fun banter and stuff like that, and then there's one that was like really, really cruel about the banter she was pushing back and forth with. And that was a former colleague of Theo. The actress was fine. I mean, I just thought that, okay, this is a little bit tonally inconsistent. Kate McKinnon seems to just be doing her own thing in this. And basically, yeah, again, there's a point where the daughter had her first period. Ivy wasn't there. She felt like she's missed out on a lot of stuff. And he suggests, hey, maybe I could do some architecture stuff, because he builds this nice lavish house. They spend a whole lot of money on it, but instead of, Michael Douglas's character putting up a lot of the money for it so his wife can have the dream house. It was already built, by the way. Instead of that, and then having her have her own business. In this one, Ivy's own business is paying for this house, essentially. Even though I'm sure he's got some kind of, amount of money in his account, it just, it's the reversal. I don't mind that. I actually like that little bit of a switch, but just nothing is done with it. It just feels like they took a few pieces of furniture and rearranged them a little bit, but didn't bother to really, it just didn't work. And when we finally get to where they have their full on just like break down the goddamn house and stuff like that. There's even a point where she's wondering why he won't look at her. Why she had said she had thought of shagging him the whole way back from New York. But he's been really working on the kids. So husband goes away on work. And the wife is too tired. Now it's the wife's for it and the husband's too tired. But again, rearranging the furniture. So basically we get where they end up kind of destroying some of the house and stuff like that. The stove had Julia Childs' or was Julia Childs' stove, I guess. There was a table from the 15th century with a 15th century dagger in it, or a table with a 15th century dagger in it. And we have the chandelier part that falls, but nobody hanging from the chandelier like at the end of the War of the Roses. And essentially, they do end up basically coming to an agreement. He says he's always cared about her. And, this kind of stuff has just gotten out of control and everything. She feels that he's a little too needy, but also she does love him. This kind of stuff. And also it's a smart home, so they talk to Hal, who's the voice turner on, that kind of stuff. So basically, the chandelier's been destroyed, the stove's been destroyed, and it's a gas-powered stove, so guess where I'm going with this. To conclude the movie, we have, them say, hey, play our song. He says, as they're laying down in bed, he's on top of her, and then it literally cuts to the credits. So the implication is that maybe the house blew up, maybe they, succumbed to gas poisoning. I felt like I was succumbing to boredom poisoning, because this movie ended up being really goddamn boring. And I mean, that actually was the biggest issue with it. It wasn't that it was bad. I mean, there were bad parts to it, but instead it was boring. That's really all I have to say about the Roses. So unfortunately, just doesn't work. It's not funny. Not funny enough to justify the changes and also justify the tone changes. So, that being said, agree, disagree what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Retlin, and until we get crabs again, happy trails to you.